Welcome everybody to this Dynamic Boards NED Community meetup. Jaedon Green is here today doing a talk for us on the topic of working with the regulator. Jaedon is a member of our NED community and is well equipped for today's topic with nearly 40 years of experience working in regulated industries. He has 35 years in an executive capacity. He was the Chief Customer Officer at Leeds Building Society and was routinely consulted by the government, developers, trade bodies and the Bank of England as an independent subject matter expert. And approaching 10 years in a non-exec capacity now, he has NED experience with Ecology Building Society, Community Housing Group, Coasts Housing Association, and he's an independent member of the Audit Risk Committee at Yorkshire Housing. He's worked across multiple regulators. In financial services, he's worked with the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, and the PRA, Prudential Regulatory Authority. And more broadly, he's worked with the Care Quality Commission, Charity Commission, and Social Housing Regulator. Did a bit of research for this. There are over 100 regulators in the UK. So from Ofsted to the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority to Drinking Water Quality Regulator for Scotland. There's a huge number of regulators out there, many of whom you probably haven't even heard of. So whether your board feeds directly into a regulator, as Jaedon's have, or whether it serves customers who are in regulated markets, regulation is a key part of UK organisational governance. I know Jaedon's experience will be applicable to many of these other regulators, and I'm grateful for us to have a chance to get thinking about how we approach working with regulators well as NEDs, chairs and trustees. So Jaedon, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Let me start by managing expectations. I do not have all the answers. After 40 years, I still have plenty of questions, and we'll come to those later. So where to begin? Yes, regulators evolve as events unfold around us. The financial services industry is a good example. Prior to the global financial crisis, the industry had one regulator, the FSA. What followed was unprecedented, and the regulatory environment needed to adapt. Out went the Financial Services Authority, replaced with the Financial Conduct Authority to protect consumers, and the Prudential Regulatory Authority to drive stability. I highlight this because what's here and now changes tomorrow. That's the way regulation evolves. But we're all non-executives. We all carry the legal liability of the organisation we work with. Do regulators really add any additional complexity? In theory, not if we do our jobs well and provide robust oversight, constructive, challenging, striving for good customer outcomes. In practice, though, they introduce a different dynamic. Some roles are subject to regulatory approval. The organisation can offer a job to whoever they want, but some regulators get the final say on certain appointments. Who chairs your audit committee, remuneration committee, the chief executive, and yes, even the chair. Think of it as a holistic oversight for board decisions on recruitment and succession. But recruitment and approval is only part of the story. Regulatory permissions can be withdrawn. That may sound harsh. In practice, it's typically a nudge that changes are needed, but a nudge that is not to be ignored. So we should always be asking ourselves, do we have a realistic plan B for our chair, or even our CEO if nudged that way? And regulators don't work in silos. Just like our own networks, they talk. For anyone working across multiple regulators, there is an ever-present risk of contagion. Removal from one regulated role could readily lead to questions from another. Which presents our first challenge. Normally, as a non-exec, as long as we operate within the letter of the law, we're safe. Safe from legal consequences, and usually safe from reputational risk. Rules provide guardrails. A rear-view mirror, often built on past experience or case law, but a regulator needs a more flexible approach for uncertain times. Many navigate this challenging approach by favouring principles over rules. Rules usually have one clear interpretation, which is great for the here and now or looking back, but principles provide flexibility, potentially open to interpretation and extrapolation. This approach allows the regulator to set future expectations, whilst creating flexibility for retrospective review of a firm's actions, albeit almost always with the benefit of hindsight. They should also provide a guide for industries and for those who work within them. As an executive or a non-executive, we make the best decision we can using the information available at the time, our best, or occasionally our least worst option, But things do go wrong. Nobody's perfect, and that's before the impact of external events. So what happens if a product or service built for the prevailing economic environment subsequently fails to perform in the here and now? The Financial Conduct Authority's Consumer Duty principles clearly state a firm must act to deliver good outcomes for retail clients. That means anticipating how products and services will perform under different conditions, understanding how they break, not just how they work. And how do we resolve conflict when the principles of one regulator may cut across the principles of another? By way of example, increasing the interest charged to customers builds capital strength for banks, thereby creating financial stability. It's a tick for the Prudential Regulatory Authority. But not necessarily fair value for consumer, and therefore potentially at odds with conduct risk, which is managed by the Financial Conduct Authority. So that brings me to my first question. In a regulated environment, how do we balance the imperative to drive the business forward with courage without constantly playing it safe for fear of what we'll find in the rearview mirror, or even what the regulator will find in the rearview mirror? I'll leave that one for the discussion group shortly. It's probably a good time to introduce some more principles. You must act with integrity. Well, that's fair enough. You must act with due care, skill, and diligence. Again, fair enough. You must be open and cooperative with regulators. Now that's worth reflecting on. Let's unpack that last principle. You must be open and cooperative. It's not talking about the organisation. Each firm will have a relationship with its regulator, but this is different. Some roles naturally lead to a discussion with the regulator. A 4-yearly inspection interview for a chair and chair of audit in social housing, an annual regulatory visit in financial services, and whoever they ask to interview. It'll vary each year. But this principle is embedded in the everyday, not the infrequent. It hints at two conversations: the conversation that a firm has with its regulator, and the conversation that you may be expected to have as a non-exec. In most cases, these will be aligned. It highlights the need to understand the ongoing regulatory conversation. But what happens if things are going less well, or you have concerns? Here is a clear expectation that you will speak up, and you will engage appropriately. To have known there was a problem and done nothing is no defence. This highlights the need to think about our relationship with the regulator, which may at times be different to that of each of our colleagues and of the business. How will us, as non-execs, reconcile those differences? And when we talk about our conversation with the regulator, what do we mean? Everything is on the record. What we write, what we say, the questions we ask, and those we don't. It's all discoverable. Even the corridor chat as you wait for a colleague using the facilities. Yes, even that. Nothing is sacred. A brief conversation that lies dormant until followed up with related questions a few months later. And in a digital world, it's genuinely almost everything we say and do. A quick use of Google will lead to examples of chairs and non-executives who've made inappropriate or careless comments on social media. Some read the runes. Others were encouraged to step down by their regulator. Which brings me neatly to our second question. What is an acceptable level of social media presence for non-execs in the regulated industry? And does the platform of choice make any difference? Again, I'll leave that for the discussion groups. When we think about the different conversations, it highlights the need to stay up to date. Let's be clear, I'm not talking about e-learning, albeit that does count to any continuous professional development requirements. Regulators readily expect us to be familiar with legislative changes, regulatory changes, capital, liquidity, resilience, consumer trends, and technological advances, to name just a few. Which neatly brings me to my third question. How much time should we be prepared to invest in our individual CPD? And whose responsibility is it to direct and source that material? Us as an individual? The organisation? The regulator? How do I get comfortable I've got the right material? With so much that can go wrong, why bother? There are plenty of non-exec roles in non-regulated industries. Isn't that the easier option? In truth, the regulated industries add another dimension or complexity. But regulators are typically there to protect the vulnerable. These industries need non-execs. Non-execs who'll provide appropriate oversight and defend the guardrails where needed. Individuals who'll push organisations to be better, even in an uncertain world. Individuals who'll be aware of their rearview mirror, but they won't let it hold them back. Individuals who can wrestle with complexity and help resolve conflicts. Who can share their experience without letting it control them. Individuals who can speak truth to power, be that the CEO or the regulator. Yes, there is more to think about, more to consider, but don't let it put you off. You're likely thinking through many of these issues in other roles. In fact, working in a regulated industry often brings skills and ways of working that are helpful in other industries. After all, there were times when regulated industries were not regulated. Others sit outside regulation, but perhaps for some that's only a matter of time. And as I said at the start, just like the external environment, regulation evolves. On that note, I'll hand back to Sarah.
Thank you, Jaedon. You've given us loads to think about there. And I'm sure many of the people who joined this call, you are on the board of a regulated entity, so you can relate to much of what Jaedon shared. Jaedon, thank you for your time in preparing that talk for us and sharing from your experience. And you've alluded to these 3 questions, so I will share them with you now. The first one is, how do we drive things forwards without fear of what the regulators or what lawyers might think of our decisions with the benefit of hindsight? What is an acceptable level of social media presence for NEDs? Curious if you've got any stories on that vein. And kind of what sort of platforms do you think it's best for them to be using? Any sense of that? Then, and Jaedon talked about NED CPD. You know, whose responsibility is it? Is it the individuals, the organisations, the regulators? How much time should you commit, and how have you found working that out? We're going to take a few minutes now just to reflect on your own views of these questions before we jump into breakout rooms.